Hey everybody, welcome to the Mando Fan Show. I'm John. Thanks for joining us today. It is Friday, TGIF, although for a lot of us it's whatever day, right? But we're here to talk about the Disney Gallery series about The Mandalorian, Episode 3, about the cast. And speaking of cast, with me as always, my castmates on TRB, or co-hosts, James and Lacey. Guys, how's it going? Happy Friday morning.
Yeah, going good.
I'm tired.
Yeah, so we did some recording for the Resistance broadcast last night, and I feel like we just took a 15-minute break, it feels like a little bit, but here we are.
The only thing that makes me a morning person is Star Wars. That is the only thing.
Yes. And a big old cup of coffee.
Mine's downstairs.
So, yeah, we're going to talk about the third episode on the Disney Gallery, all about the cast, which really focused on Pedro Pascal, Gina Carano, and Carl Weathers. And then still a little bit more about Filoni and Favreau and that sort of stuff. But now, if you're new to the Mando Fan Show, welcome. We appreciate you joining us. This obviously can be found not just on YouTube, but also on the podcast feed as well. So wherever you get your podcasts, if you can't watch for whatever reason, you can check us out on audio if you're out doing yard work or whatever you're doing out there in these crazy times. But it's a little different than the Mando Fan Show that covers the actual show itself. So we're not going to be doing the ratings and that sort of stuff, and we're not really featuring tweets. We're just kind of really getting down into it here. But one thing we do is each go around and give our favorite or standout part of this particular episode. So let's get that going now. Lacey, this one is all about the cast. It was only a 26-minute episode, but I thought that was enough, I guess. What was your standout part from this episode, and why was it how awesome Gina Carano is?
So it's funny you'd say that, because if I was going into this not watching it yet, I'd be like, oh, Gina would be my favorite part. She was wonderful, and we will get into that. But my standout part was actually when they talked about Carl Weathers and how he talks about when you're an actor and you look at a script, it's not just being an actor, it's you're letting someone speak for you, basically, and you're endorsing what they say. And then it going into how he was so wonderful. They were like, we can't put him in a mask, and we don't want to kill him off, which reminds me very much of like Oscar Isaac with The Force Awakens, where he was supposed to die and then he didn't. And then other projects too, like Steve from Stranger Things was supposed to die early on, and they liked him so much that they kept him on, and he's like a fan favorite. So it was just very interesting to me that they were like, yeah, we brought him in, he started talking, and we both were like, oh, we can't put him in a mask, he's just too wonderful. And it was really funny.
Yeah, I agree. I've been a fan of Carl Weathers for a long time because I was like an 80s action kid fan and Predator.
I'm not, so that's why I was kind of caught off guard that I was like, oh, my favorite part is Carl Weathers.
Right. And he just comes across, I had so much more respect for him just as a talent and an understanding of the industry and stuff off of this. And that's embarrassing for me to say because he's been around for decades and decades, but definitely a standout part. James, what was your favorite part from this episode about the cast?
I actually think it was near the beginning when they were talking about the people who play the Mandalorian besides Pedro Pascal.
Yeah.
We talked about whether that was going to be featured or not, and I'm almost embarrassed to say I didn't know that there were two others.
Oh, really?
No. I think because one of those guys is unknown and one of those guys is known in his own right. So Brendan Wayne, everybody is like, oh, yeah, here's the story with him, and it's 90% that guy, and blah, 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 and stuff. And then I'm like, okay, so he's really the guy in the suit, and then Pedro Pascal is the face, and, you know, the acting and the voice and other things like that. But I didn't know that they had somebody else involved, and it was really interesting to see both of those people without the helmet in the scenes, and them on set, and I don't know, like performing the scenes in the way that they're describing them. So we have this guy who's a gunslinger, and then you see like 15 shots of different like gun pulls and things, and then this guy who's like a ninjutsu warrior or whatever. I think that's the phrasing they used, and yeah, it was crazy because, you know, the physicality of what he's bringing to it as well, you know. So I was like, okay, so they kind of like built this character. They have like the soul and then like multiple parts of like his ability, you know, as a physical character. So I don't know. I just thought it was kind of interesting that that they did finally highlight that finally, like it's episode 3, you know, but after all this time, it feels like they're shining a little bit of a light on how there's more than one Mandalorian. It's not just Pedro Pascal.
That really surprised me because the beginning of the episode, they start with Pedro Pascal, and I'm like, all right, finally, they're bringing him in here.
Right.
And when they do the overlays and they show like footage of making of, it's him with his helmet off laying down. I'm like, they're really harping on that one shot that he's actually in the suit. I'm like, they're going to try to play this off that he was in there the whole time. It's going to be really awkward. And then they do that, James, and I'm like, finally. I'm like, it was getting weird. And I know they could have pulled the wool over everyone's eyes, but like diehard fans are looking at that like, how are they going to navigate this? And I'm glad they kind of opened up the curtain and the wizard was there pulling all the strings and whatever.
I'm glad
his wording too
Go ahead, James.
was that he was third to these other two.
Sure. Yeah, that's him being humble.
I don't know if he's being... Yeah, I didn't know if he was like trying to be generous or he was like just really being, you know, like I'm the star, but you know, it's you guys that make the movie. You know, it's like it's kind of like that. It felt like it could have been that.
Yeah,
I know, but then it legitimately, I think, was him saying like, look, at the end of the day, like, yeah, I'm this person, I'm the person that's associated with it, but I'm third tier
right
to the two others who actually are the Mandalorian. It's the way that it kind of came off to me, but I could see it going both ways.
Yeah, so he does seem like a very genuine guy, and even at the celebration panel, he seemed very humbled and all that sort of stuff.
He kept calling himself a nerd and a geek, and I was like, if you're a nerd, then what does that make me?
Right.
Because you're like super cool, super casual, like you're the guy that everybody wants to invite to the party, so like, where do I land on that spectrum of cool?
Well, Alex Trebek would say, losers, in other words.
Yeah, right. That is such a funny clip of Jeopardy. Go find that. But so Lateef Crowder, the other guy in the suit, I looked him up. He does a lot of stunts. He was in Furious 7, Captain America, Civil War, Wonder Woman. So he does a lot of that type of stuff. And as he was saying, like he's more of like the martial art jiu-jitsu when you see Mando doing hand-to-hand fighting. And then the other one is Wayne. Yeah, who is the grandson of
John Wayne.
John Wayne. And he looks like he's a cowboy in his own right. He's got his cowboy hat on. He's like, I just got to shoot guns. I'm really happy about it. I'm like, this guy's right off a ranch
right.
in like SoCal.
He's very good at pulling guns, though. They kept showing clips of it, like, and I was like, wow, he is very good at this.
Right, where Pedro might be like, whoa. You know. So my favorite part actually has to do with Pedro Pascal, and it's when he was talking about how he's done all these stunts for Narcos and all these big action scenes for Game of Thrones and stuff, and he got hurt walking out of the makeup trailer for his one main scene in The Mandalorian in the suit, and he walked in like a piece of plywood and like cut up his face or something. And
7 stitches he got.
They had to take him to the ER, and they said that because he still had all the makeup on from being hurt as the Mandalorian, the ER thought it was worse, so they rushed him in.
They were like, come in here.
I thought that was the funniest thing. And the fact that he wasn't in the suit for like the entire show except that one spot, and these other two guys are doing all this stuff and they're not getting hurt. He's walking out of his makeup trailer and busts up his face.
That's so funny. And then the fact that he then went back and shot the stuff. He didn't stop.
Yeah, you have to, right?
Yeah.
He's like, I'm finally in the suit. Imagine I have to tag these guys back in now.
Yeah.
That's what I was looking for. He was in Triple Frontier, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, that was like probably filming right around the same time. And I think that might have been, I don't know, unless he was describing something that I'm not aware of, but when he was talking about the places that he was just at, and then he comes over here and does this. I was picturing all the places he was at in Triple Frontier, which is like, you know, all these crazy helicopter.
It sounds like something I would
over
do. Walk into
crazy
something.
lands with forests and mountains and stuff. Yeah.
I'm so clumsy.
I've walked into a bunch of things in my day. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. When they said that, I was like, yeah, relatable.
And not to throw my brother under the bus, but one time he walked, like, sometimes birds fly into windows because they don't realize that they're...
He walked into a door?
He walked into a sliding glass door and broke his nose.
How hard was he walking?
He's power walking, I think. He's trying to do a Mando walk or something. But so let's stay on Pedro Pascal then, and then we'll go to Gina and Carl Weathers. So Pedro Pascal, did you guys take anything new away from him out of this in terms of his process and stuff? I'll just say out of the gate, the voiceover section of him actually recording the lines was very interesting to me. But James, you want to kick it off with Pedro and any takeaways you have on this?
Yeah, I wrote that down, the voiceover for Mandalorian, kind of in that like hollowed out theater or whatever. I thought it was a little strange. It seemed like they were putting an effect on him, like the helmet effect during the recording process, or I don't know if that's like just for this show. They were like, oh, we'll just add it in. But like in real life, the real recording was his voice. I don't know. It was kind of strange to me. I was like, I want to hear him say the line without the effect.
I think they did it in post. I think they added it in post.
Yeah. Well, I was curious, like, is the camera picking up the microphone through a filter? So this is like the real shot, but that's what you're hearing. I was like, no, they probably just did this just to do it. And I was like, I don't want to see that. I know what he sounds like in the helmet. I want to hear him do the lines without the helmet. That's the point of watching this behind the scenes thing. So I was kind of bummed about that, but I really liked seeing the scene, and I really like, because I do voiceover stuff too for my work, and right now you're looking at it. I sit at my computer and I did the voiceover, but no, I did think that was interesting, and that I didn't really take too much away from him, other than that fact that we talked about it. He was really humble, and
Lacey, anything else on Pedro?
Yeah, I think he's just so nice. Like, he just seems really genuinely nice. He seems like he has a great sense of humor. Everyone loves him, and I feel like this cast in particular, we see all these other casts that are like, oh, we love Star Wars, we love working together, it was so great. But even with The Rise of Skywalker, I felt that there were moments that they kind of seemed tired. Like, they were just kind of like, yeah, we're here again. Like, this cast, every time they're together, they're like laughing or smiling, or like they just love each other and speak of each other so highly. But with Pedro in particular, the voiceover stuff definitely stuck out to me, because I do stuff, audio work as well. And it was nice to see that I'm not crazy and that like you fully act it out. Like, people, there's this misconception that when you do audio work that you're just reading, and that's not the case whatsoever. Like, I laughed really hard to the point that I had to go back and watch it when he's holding the pillow like Baby Yoda. And he's just like doing the full scene with this pillow, and then there's the shot of him screaming into the pillow, like away from the microphone, which made me laugh too, because I was like, he is going for it.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, people connect with voice actors so much, is because they are fully acting, and oftentimes it's harder than being a regular actor, because which we'll get into with Carl Weathers, is like, you have eyes, you have bodies to react to, whereas with voiceover, you're literally looking at a piece of paper or a screen or whatever.
Right.
In a weird way, they say that about the prequels. Like, they're like, oh, we were acting against nothing. We were acting to the green screen, right? It's almost like voice actors deal with that all the time. They're not tough in the scene. They're not actually physically wearing the outfit, looking around. They're not on set. They just have to like picture it in their head and nail it. I mean, they see a screen, but
yeah, and they're not like in the environment. And there's just like my own anxiety kind of peaked when you're sitting there and you're watching him read the lines with Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau. Like, I get nervous when I do a voiceover in front of one person, let alone two people like that. You're like, oh God, because like there's nothing to hide behind. It's so vulnerable, and you're just there. So I have to really applaud him.
Where I do it at work, I'm in a room where I swear if I do it at regular voice, I know they can hear me.
Yeah.
And it drives me nuts because whenever you make a mistake or something, you feel like somebody in the other room is like, stop saying the same sentence over and over.
Yeah,
that guy is crazy.
I record my stuff in a closet inside of a room, like 3 rooms over from Matt, so he'll never hear it.
You know, I was my son's like obsessed with Toy Story right now, and I was watching like.
Are you glad that it's not Matcha and the Bear anymore?
Yes, I am. Hate that show. We're not doing the Matcha fan show. So I was watching a documentary of them recording like the lines, and Tom Hanks was talking about it, and he's like, "This was way harder than I ever could have possibly imagined." And that's Tom Hanks, you know. And then I'm seeing like Pedro Pascal in that room, and you got Filoni in one of the back in the seats in the back, and he's laughing and having fun, but Favreau's like right in it, standing next to him, and you almost feel like Favreau creates this like positive culture in that room where you could see him really enjoying the process, and they're like having a discussion about it, and it's not like, okay,
super
try that again, but do it like this. He's like, no, yeah. He's like, what if you did this? And like, I feel like Favreau just kind of creates this whole environment. I really feel like that's like an understated thing.
Even when you're failing.
Yeah.
Yes. like when you're describing him standing next to the microphone, I just picture him being like, okay, you're not doing it right. I'm trying to figure out how to get you where you need to be, but you're not doing it right, you know?
He's the ultimate hype man. But a hype man that hugs you instead of like yelling
it's
at
like
you.
It's like what Eunice was saying. If you guys haven't checked it out, check out our interview with Eunice Huthart from The Rise of Skywalker. At this point, yesterday. She had said like JJ would be like, no, that's not a good idea, but let's try this, and it would get everyone amped up. It's kind of like Favreau was almost keeps that theme going in this. But again, you know, my last take on Pedro, just you have to have, I guess, a certain confidence as an actor to be the lead marquee name, lead role, playing the Mandalorian, knowing you're really only doing voice stuff, and being comfortable in that, and people finding that out. And he is so humble about that. And like you said, James, him saying I'm the third fiddle here. If you are an insecure actor or a narcissist or something like that, he's trying to bury that as much as possible and like counteract what the situation is. But he's like, no, like these guys did that stuff, and that really is endearing to him. And like you said, Lacey, this whole cast together just seems like a really tight-knit group. And that it goes to the directors, too, as we talked about in the first episode of the Mando Fan Show for this run here. But let's move on to someone who kind of brings that. Gina Carano, like, holy hell. I mean, Lacey, start us off with that, because I have some notes myself, but the Gina Carano section and stuff that you had brought up previously on the Mando Fan Show when we were talking about the actual show itself, they actually show footage of. So what are your thoughts on Gina Carano's section of this cast episode?
I'm still in love with her.
Me too.
She is just like, she's someone that, first of all, I don't want to be shallow, but like, she's gorgeous, and I've never seen her not look gorgeous. So good on that. She looks great. But yeah, no, the funny thing or the interesting thing that I discovered in this show was when they talked about how the concept art was all her before she had even, I think, accepted the role or was offered the role. Like, Jon Favreau was like, I want Gina Carano. And like all the concept art was all Gina. And that's, I'm sure for her, super flattering that anybody would think of you for something like this. But she's just so humble. And you can tell she's super tough, and she is a real hard worker. But it's kind of interesting, and I don't mean to go back to this, but it just happened. Our interview with Eunice with Daisy Ridley too is like, she said that sometimes she doesn't believe in herself enough to do things, and I kind of get that vibe a little bit from Gina as well. Is she said a couple times now that Jon Favreau is the one that kind of pushed her into this and was like, you can handle this, you can do this, trust in yourself.
Yeah.
But my favorite part was definitely her talking about carrying the guy. Like, we talked about that during the regular season of the the show, season 1, from the panel. And to have I don't remember her name because I just watched this once. I'll go back and watch it again. But I think it was like the assistant director when she was like, it's great to see a tough person. But like she was straight up carrying that dude. And her.
Mm-hmm.
And she had said that she kept doing it over and over and over again. And Gina was like, yeah, they told me I didn't have to, but I wanted to. And like she lifted that guy like it was nothing. Like she's tough. And I loved that they talked about how they wanted a character that was tough, that could fight, that was this rough character that was a woman. And I love that, that she looks just like Gina looks. And it basically is Gina.
That's a great point because Gina Carano obviously was a professional butt kicker, to be polite about it.
She still is, yeah.
So was Jon Favreau. He was an MMA fighter as well.
On Friends, yeah. Funny guy. But it doesn't feel like it's not forced with her. Whereas with some actors, even Pedro joked about himself. He's like, I'm a nerd. Like, I'm not a fighter. Or like you have like just like a small actor and they're like supposed to be like tough guy or whatever. Gina Carano's just like, she will damage you and you believe it because she can,
and she knows how to take a punch too. They talked about that, how like she knows how to
and her
give
facial
a punch.
expressions. James, Gina Carano, anything surprise you from her bits on this or anything that stood out to you?
Yeah, I think what's funny about her segment is that while nothing, like I mentioned my favorite part, I don't think anything was my favorite part, but I think she had the most interesting things about her. Starting with the fact that Bryce Dallas Howard said that Kathleen Kennedy said every character has a silhouette, and I don't attribute that quote to her, but it may be because I attribute it to Doug Chiang. He said that about every Star Wars ship in the prequels, and I think he was even referencing George Lucas saying that, or somebody, I don't know. It's kind of crazy. So
it's been passed down through the generations.
Yeah, that's like in the mindset of Lucasfilm, that whole thing about like every character, every ship, every product that they create for Star Wars has this unique silhouette. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. That's not specifically about her, but they use it in reference to her. And I was like, oh, that's really cool that they, tie her into the bigger lore there. I thought it was interesting that she had no audition.
Right.
Yes.
That was really cool to hear. And when they talk about that too, like, even Pedro was like, oh, that's from her from Haywire and stuff, and I'm like, man, it's funny, like this person to me didn't exist before this show, even though I knew she was in Deadpool and I saw Deadpool. That was just
see Haywire. It's so good.
Person.
Yeah.
Is it a TV show?
No, it's a movie.
It's a movie?
Yeah. It's like an action movie. It's good.
Yeah. So it was interesting to me that, someone like Jon Favreau was like, I'm not even worried at all because I'm basing it on her acting ability from what I've seen in this and this and this and this, and that's the person that I want. And it just so happens to align with the physicality of the character that we're looking for. So I was like, oh, dang. Okay. All right. That works.
I agree. You guys make great points. And, the other thing that like Favreau brought up, which it's so amazing. Like sometimes you just think like this guy's just a pro and he's just gonna crush this show. Like his like historical awareness of cinema and stuff is just amazing. And him talking about how he liked Gina and what made him think of the idea to bring her in was because of old Westerns would literally cast like real cowboys. And who knew how to ranch and corral and that sort of stuff, and they wound up becoming actors in that way. And he saw that in Gina because she came into acting because of her physicality and mixed martial arts in MMA fighting. And that parallel, I never really would have made that connection if he didn't bring that up. And she's kind of taken that path, and it's, history does kind of repeat itself in that way, where in the old Westerns they did it, and now you have people coming out of, combat fighting, and they're going into action roles and stuff, and him kind of talking about how she can own that role in that way and has that confidence to do it. But then my other takeaway from Carano has to be her like just fanning over Carl Weathers and talking about how he helped her so much, even with a reassuring sentence like, if she was messing up, he's reading the newspaper and just be like, it happens to all of us. Don't worry about it, kid. Like the old sage, like, don't worry about it, kid. It happens to the best of us, Yeah. And she said he meant so much to her and that he's a legend. And you could see, like, in that roundtable, Carl Weathers, like, really appreciated it because he's been out of the game for a while. Like, people forgot about Carl Weathers, right? Like, people in our generation are like, oh, the guy with the one hand from Happy Gilmore? It's like, no, Carl Weathers has done some good stuff.
So it's funny you say that, because the way James just reacted to Gina being like, oh, I hadn't really heard. Carl Weathers is that for me. Like, I was like, okay, I know he's in a couple things, but I don't really know him.
Yeah.
So it's similar boat.
So her just praising him and seeing him really appreciate that, and you kind of feel like he feels like he has like a second act now in his career. He's around 70, and we had talked about how some of his dialogue, at least from my perspective, felt a little choppy in his delivery, but I think that's just how he wanted to be with the character. And
they loved it. They said it was like sing-songy, it was beautiful,
right.
And I was just like, oh, I kind of feel bad now for the way that we critiqued it.
I think I got to change my tune now, because he was very deliberate in his process with that. So, but let's get into Carl Weathers right now.
I thought that was really interesting, like the way the cast was describing how he performed the character and stuff, and then they'd cut to a scene and he's there like delivering every syllable, like, it is imperative that we do this thing, I'm like, oh my gosh, it like, I don't know, I'm still kind of like, I mean, I love this show, but I'm still kind of like, really, Carl Weathers?
Get out of here.
I am. I see that delivery and I go, it seems like he's... The only thing that I'll say is, in this, he says that he's like a boastful character, and he's very sure of his surroundings and like loud personality and stuff. So if I was told that was the character, I might too go into that and be like confident, like loud speaking, and everybody in the room can hear me.
Yeah.
John Huston and Orson Welles. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of one of those things where it's like, maybe it's not exactly the acting that I don't like. It's the fact that he is perfectly executing a character that I don't think I would get along with.
Yeah,
maybe that's what
does
it is.
that kind of make sense?
Like deep-seated, like, oh, I don't like that guy. I don't.
Because when you
I'd be like, dude, stop being so big. Like, while you're sitting here and it's like, your success is my success, and I'm
Orson
like,
Welles plays
all right,
he plays
out,
that character
dude.
In Citizen Kane. You just like hate him. You're like, ugh.
Yeah, it's that booming voice that really hammers every syllable and stuff. But I want to do a Mandalorian rewatch, because I want to say now, looking back and after having watched this, it's almost like Grief Karga wants to put on a certain persona when there's other people in the room who need to hear him.
Yeah.
And the other Mandalorians, the other bounty hunters are around, and he's like, your success is my success. Yeah. And he wants to put off that persona, but when like the chips are down in like, chapter 8, chapter 7 and stuff, he dials it down a bit. So I want to kind of rewatch that and see if that's the case, where it's almost like a put on for the character and not so much the actor. But
I rewatched just a clip of that just cause like yesterday, and like as soon as they pull out the e-web and stuff, he's like, it's over. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's not as pronounced, if I remember correctly. So
now
now that I've seen this, I think you're right, John. I think it warrants a rewatch and kind of paying attention to how he delivers his character throughout his character's arc.
But there is definitely a confidence that comes with Carl Weathers that I learned more about while watching this, especially the part where they talk about how they brought him in and then they talk about how we can't cover you up. And he's like, I know, I figured as much. Yeah. Like his response to Jon Favreau was like, I knew you weren't going to do that.
But he was on board with it because he's a pro. He's like, all right.
He's like, I knew they weren't going to do this.
And they were going to kill him off. They were going to kill him off in chapter 3.
Right. Kind of like a Poe Dameron.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, yeah. The other thing, too, when they were talking about his section in particular, which then changed the whole mask thing outside of it just being Carl Weathers, is that they said that they practiced in the masks and the guys couldn't see anything. And Dave Filoni was like, oh, I can't. And Dave Filoni, first of all, calling Jon Favreau coach.
Yes.
Is hilarious to me.
Yes.
And then him talking about how he went over and was like, okay, this is my first time directing live action. I got to make this guy get the mark and blah, blah, blah. And he's all nervous in front of Jon Favreau. And then he goes back and Jon's like, no, let me try. So then Jon goes over and they both watch and they're like, okay, we're both just bad at this. This is not working. But him calling him coach definitely stuck out to me. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Coach.
The way he was describing directing live action versus animation is how I feel when a family member or something is like, I'm trying to fix their tech over the phone.
He said I could draw this. He's like, I could just draw this right now. If I could just draw this.
Exactly. They're telling me, they're like, all right, I'm looking for settings or whatever.
Or me, like 5 minutes ago.
It's true.
Well, yeah, but it's nowhere near as bad with you. Sometimes it's like, they're like, I don't see it. It's just, the screen is black now. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I'm just, I wish I could just,
can you hear
sit
me
down
now?
And be there and fix it for you. But I can't. I have to navigate my thoughts through to you somehow.
My dad just brings the whole entire piece of equipment over. Bill Gill will just be like, I have my email won't open. Here's the computer. I'm like, Dad, you can just call.
Filoni does that to Favreau. He's like, here's the mask. I don't know what to do.
But I loved where Dave was just like, I could have just drawn it. And I was like, if I could just draw this, I would know how to,
When he goes, I'm standing there and there's this guy trying to look out of these 4 holes in the mask. And I'm just like, what are we doing? It's so fun because it makes you think of the original canteen in Star Wars where these rubber masks are on these people and they're bumping into stuff. And Star Wars is so stupid in that way.
Even Kylo Ren, he couldn't see anything.
Yeah.
Like in a weird way, it's not the same thing, but imagine making a show and you're like, yeah, that's Kanan, right? And you're like, that's him. And then you're like, we're going to do a live action Kanan. That sounds great. And then you get there and it's a guy in a Halloween Kanan mask.
Right.
And you're like, this is not what I was thinking.
Right. It's got the 2 slits for the eyes.
It's a really ratted wig with a ponytail.
Yeah. With the phrase. Yeah. I agree with that whole, Filoni thing, and I guess that's pretty much
they end again with Filoni.
Yeah, so that pretty much rounds this out. So Filoni, talking with Favreau, and it almost feels like Filoni has a little bit of that imposter syndrome in terms of doing live action, and can I actually do this? And that Favreau really helped him out, and you didn't hear about that, and you wouldn't have heard about that unless Filoni said it.
He definitely came across more vulnerable to me in this episode, and I think in the series altogether. I'm not the biggest animation fan, but I feel like meeting Dave Filoni in person, having conversations with him, and then seeing him at celebrations, he comes across as very confident and very set in what he thinks about Star Wars, and rightfully so. And then you watch this show and you're like, oh, he is kind of vulnerable. He is kind of learning how things go and learning about Star Wars in different ways and kind of changing his views of things. And it's actually super refreshing to see because of what I've known before of him and what he does and interactions I've had with him that he didn't come across that way. So it's been nice to see.
And it's funny, the way that Dave Filoni speaks, it's almost like if you grow up in a big family and a big family dinner and you don't get a lot of chances to talk, he'll go on to his next sentence before he finishes his last one, so he'll finish it up real quick, like JJ kind of does, where he's like, and then we had to go to the accident, and then he like, and it's almost like he's afraid that people are getting tired of listening to him talk, and that might be part of his personality. So he's like, all right, let me buzz through that, and then that, and it's just an interesting way to hear how he speaks, and I feel like that's kind of like a showcase of what his kind of personality is. So he like kind of wants to get what he needs to say out, and he has so many thoughts, but he has only so many limited words to do it in, and he wants to make sure that people aren't losing interest in what he's saying, and I think that's also endearing. But
right.
Anything else before we get out of here? The next episode's going to be about technology, so we're going to see a lot about this, the volume and all that stuff, and how probably they were able to keep some secrets because they're in that room, and I'm very excited about that, and I'm curious how deep they go, because a lot of this has still been on the surface and not really showing making of. It's more of like reflecting in terms of this documentary. But
we're only halfway through after 4, right? Yeah.
Right. So any last parting words about the cast episode before we get out of here, James?
No, nothing particular. I mean, we went through all my notes. We wrote down and talked about everything that I put down.
Okay.
I just I like this episode, I think, the best so far.
Nice.
Like we're not doing Pedro Pascal faces, but
if we were,
but if we were,
Jade,
this episode would have been a 7 out of 10 Pedro faces.
Lacey?
This episode's really good. You know what's funny? I feel like with regular Mando, I was like, every episode's amazing. And this one, I'm like, I must wait until I see them all to decide. Like, I don't know what it is. But I still love Gina. I'd still let her punch me in the face. So that's still accurate. And then Jon Favreau is a dad, I've realized. Like, he comes across very daddish. Like, I'm the dad of this cast. I'm the dad of the show. Like,
John Dadrow.
Yeah, exactly.
I kind of wish they showed a little bit with like IG-11 and maybe some of the other characters, but I understand why they had the focus. It's a short episode. You want to put the 3 mains, and I understand that.
Taika's in the directing one too. So.
Jon Favreau was right there.
Oh,
Favreau, that's better. Yeah, let's do that. Jon Favreau, I like that. All right, so that pretty much takes us to the end of the show. Make sure you're subscribed to us because we have the Resistance broadcast twice a week and the Mando Fan Show, and we have a lot of other stuff that we're always doing on the YouTube channel and also, of course, on Patreon. Patreon.com/Resistance broadcast if you want to support us. This show right here, the Mando Fan Show, would not, I swear it, would not exist if it wasn't for our Resistance officers over there. So we have to thank you all very much for all of your support. But subscribe to us, and you have YouTube, obviously, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, and make sure you're also heading to StarWarsNewsNet.com for all of your Star Wars news. You guys can find me on Twitter at Johnny Hoey and at Star Wars Newsnet. James?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Myra Trunks.
Lacey?
People can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Lacey Gilleran.
All right. And one reminder for solo fans watching, on Monday, you're going to be able to sign up for our virtual cantina for Make Solo 2 Happen Day. So at noon on Monday, you'll be able to sign up to be a part of that. And if you can't make that, don't worry, we'll do a live stream. But it's just a week out. So obviously Make Solo 2 Happen Day is going to be on Monday the 25th. But this coming Monday, you can sign up starting at noon East for the virtual cantina, which we're going to do the night of Make Solo 2 Happen Day. But this is the Mando Fan Show. We appreciate everyone stopping by. We hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next week to talk all about technology. So until then, see you around.